Very good.
Well, hello, good evening. This is the LGBTQIA plus Intersectional Rights Task Force of the City of Salem Human Rights Commission, and I am Mike Waters, and I'm the chair. I use they and them pronouns. And this is the part of the meeting where we do introductions. So I will pass it to Tricarico.
Hi, Tricarico. I'm Tricarico, and I'm a resident of Ward 2, and my pronouns are they, them. I will pass it to Byron.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Byron Kimball, and I am a community member. I am a member of the task force, non-commissioner, and I'm a resident of Ward 5, and I use he, him pronouns. Pass it on to Gretchen.
Hi, everybody. Gretchen Bennett, staff to the commission, and live in Ward 8 and she, her pronouns. And Amelia, welcome.
Hi, I'm Amelia Knight. I use she, her pronouns, and I don't know what ward I'm in. My apologies.
No worries, Amelia. I'm in Ward 7, and I didn't mention that. But it does always seem like we need to mention our ward. But no worries if you don't know it. We have 3 of the 5 committee members here tonight, so I believe that's quorum. And did everyone get a chance to review the minutes? And would anyone like to make a motion? See, Byron would like to make a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Tricarico would second, which is good because we
I make
need
it.
somebody to
Second.
second. All those in favor? Any opposed? No opposed. Okay, we're good to go on the minutes. And I skipped over public comment. Did we have any public comment, or did you want to make any comment tonight, Amelia?
No, I want to sync up with Gretchen offline because some of my friends are interested in the Human Rights Committee.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so I'll just sync up with her later. Thank you, though.
Thank you. That's excellent
Thank
to
you,
hear.
Amelia. I'll follow up. That's great.
Well, our one and only agenda item tonight is continued work on Safe Spaces project. Gretchen has put together some material for us to review. One is a revision of the program draft that you've already seen, and the other is an outline, a sketch of the training materials. And first of all, I just want to say, Gretchen, it just looked excellent. Thank you so much for all this work. I'm sure, it'll be an iterative process and there will be changes as we go from here, but what a great start. And I'm so appreciative of all the work that went into the resource guide. And you kind of indicated in here that you have some of these things are actually developed.
That's right. Let's see. So everything that's listed under C in the outline has been developed in it's either a document or a link. Tricarico, the How to Disrupt document was something you had shared with me a while back. The pronouns fact sheet you had developed a while back.
Right.
The glossary of race relations, we'll remember Dr. Brown initiated. The When an Interruption Seems Necessary is a document from a previous Human Rights Commission a couple of years ago when they had put something together around the objective of interrupting oppression or microaggressions. What's not developed is the if there's words or text that we want to put to the notes on A and B, I was imagining these to be they could be written out a little bit.
Yeah.
Like if you're thinking about being a safe space, you've got components like your visual spaces and how you want to non-verbally communicate with the world. And you've got things to think about in relation to employee training. And I was thinking the FAQ space, the frequently asked questions place, could be a lovely place to insert some of the common hiccups or places of beginning when people really haven't done very much in this work yet, to help people navigate through some of those kind of 101 level sorts of things. And so that stuff could be built out and written out. And then there's a short note in italics at the end of documents that had been suggested in previous brainstorms, but we don't have anything in writing yet. So yeah, Mike, you're right. Some of it's written and some of it's not yet.
Oh, wonderful.
Gretchen, does that pronoun document, is that the same one that we developed around meetings, or is that a separate one that was like?
It is. There's a couple of those iterations floating around, but yeah, I was imagining the one around meetings, but the minute you ask me that, I wonder if there's an adaptation to spaces that's appropriate.
Yeah, because I remember we talked about in that meetings one, like our rule where when we have interpreters, we say our name first so that it provides that level of accessibility. And like, even though I know this is more for physical spaces, like you said, I wonder if there's other things from that. I haven't looked at it, so I don't remember what's there, but that might be something. I mean, maybe it could be more of like a general meeting etiquette. And that could be something that we kind of start with, because I'd also kind of like to envision that maybe when a city or a city entity or a business says, yeah, I want to do this program, the first thing we do is a meeting where we model a lot of this behavior, right? Because it can be really hard for people to kind of envision, like, what does this mean? Kind of like what we did. Remember when did like our HRC meet and greet meetings where, like, I think Krista and Angela were meeting with our like community resources and like telling about what the HRC is, kind of like that, I would imagine, but maybe with more of a focus on like, yeah, what does this mean for your employees? Like, what are the trainings available? What are the expectations of this? Because I feel like, based on private meetings we've had outside of this, sometimes when we send stuff out, it kind of just stops there. And I'd much rather like build on those relationships and kind of help people get to where we want them to be, and then like, here, do this stuff.
Exactly. Like, how can we build this out to make sense, but also to offer some resources? Like, I don't know how you felt about, like, here's materials that are just the way C is organized. Like, here's materials that are available. Here's some online resources. And then here's some, how did I put it? Paid
Trainings and
trainings and
resources.
Yeah, available for cost. Like the Basic Right Oregon's Fair Workplace Project had been suggested, and that one you pay a fee for. There could be other things, consultants and trainers that people may want to go deeper and have a variety. And we'd probably need to do some sort of disclaimer, that we can't guarantee or, vouch for everything, but I imagine run anything we put on here through some base of assessment or have some relationship to have an idea that it's a good resource.
Yeah, the vetting for that is really important. I know some folks on this call have been in trainings that weren't great, and we definitely don't want to be. Sorry, I have to move my cat. We don't want to be sending people to potential resources that might not be up on this variety of topics. Another wonder that I have is do we have a working list at HRC or at the city or anywhere of local consultants who we think are who we think are good choices? We have no boundaries. Who we think are good choices for this type of work?
So
I don't know. Go ahead, Tricarico.
Yeah, I reached out to both Dr. Brown and Oni Marchbank, since they both do consulting work specifically around anti-racism and other things, and they would both be interested in being resources. I also wonder if we could connect with the NAACP, because I feel like there's probably some folks in there who would either be additional resources or know of additional resources, because I know they've been compiling some lists. I would also recommend Rhodes Perry out of Portland, trans man who does some really great work about general belonging at work, but obviously brings a pretty strong intersectional lens to that. I'll probably think of more and I can email them to you, but they're people that I've attended trainings with, so I feel very confident in recommending them.
Yeah, Trans Affirming Spaces out of Portland is really good. They do our safe trainings. And speaking of our safe trainings, I think Gretchen, we could chat with Christina Lincecum at SAFE about her list. She has a number of Oregon-based, local, some local to Salem trainers. And
Great.
yeah. He just really wants to be a star today.
That's great.
Okay.
These are great tips. Thank you. I'm taking notes.
And a question, like, do we want to keep any recommend consulting firms like fairly local, or are we okay? So pretty local.
I think so.
Because I do know, like a former task force member and their partner have a DEI consulting firm out in Washington, D.C. However, you know, since like they're not local and tend to work mostly on the East Coast, like maybe not so much, but I could ask for recommendations if they have connections out here.
It might be nice if we could even, you know, if we're providing a list of these resources for cost, if we could denote which ones are specifically Salem, Oregon, and then we could even include some, you know, that are elsewhere, as long as we sort of denote it.
Sure.
I know somebody on the NAACP that I could reach out for resources also.
Thank you. Well, I was wondering if a next step would be, well, once we see what we think about this outline or sketch, imagining it in a web context and just kind of starting to write out the segments, if that makes sense. I was going to enlist assistance from a colleague to try to build some of it out, unless any of you are interested and able and have, you know, interesting capacity in, if there's sections that you would love to do or would like to do, or that's of course welcome.
I would be willing to write the introductory stuff, because I kind of have it in my brain.
Great. Does this look like, so I thought we'd look at it, then I'd ask a colleague and you, Mike, and anyone else that wants to build out the text. And then I wondered if we'd want to, I think we had suggested a couple of meetings ago, take a test run with maybe a couple of business owners that have expressed some early interest. And then maybe somebody from the Parks Board, for example, they could think it through from the standpoint of the park, you know, or we could ask Marilyn from the standpoint of Center 50 Plus to imagine, okay, and just basically have a few test run conversations to see what's missing, like how is this useful, how is this hitting you, you know? That might be a nice kind of pathway.
Yeah, I love that, especially because isn't Maryland the one that had the program for making places age accessible? I don't remember exactly what it was called, but it was a really cool program. So yeah, I'd love to have her input because she has experience in doing something similar.
Gosh, and we should probably link to that resource too.
Yeah, you know, when I was looking at this just now, and this is not in response to your question, Gretchen, so I'm sorry, it's totally an aside, but we've got good resources for LGBTQIA plus and some resources around race as well. I am seeing kind of a gap in abilities in particular. And then I was thinking about gender because gender violence is something that happens a lot. And so resources like Center for Hope and Safety, I wondered as well if there were some things like that that should be included.
Good idea.
Yeah, I think a quick, easy website would be askjan.org, the Job Accommodation Network. They have a lot of information for accommodating disabilities at work specifically, which I think would easily carry over to customer service.
Thank you.
But yeah, good catch, Mike. I might ask around and see like what are other areas that we could potentially be missing here.
Agreed. And I'm now remembering a conversation with community member Ryan or Rain and Krista a while back, and we were starting to collect resources around abilities that I didn't remember to bring into this. So I need to go back and locate those materials as well.
Do you know any context over at Disability Rights Oregon, or would that be an avenue to consider?
Yeah, Tricarico had shared one piece that's on here, but you know, they have a pretty rich resource. So yeah, absolutely. What do you think
know,
of
another, well, actually, I think it is there. I was just thinking back to when we first started these discussions, and remember we saw the model program that Seattle had, and we wanted our program to be a lot more robust than what Seattle had. But do we have the kind of the basis of Seattle's program was literally like around making sure people reported bias crimes? Do we have, I guess we do, I just found it. Just like that aspect of crime, which is a little different from incidents, but we do have it, so I apologize.
No, you're okay. And I don't know if we really like, if the outline's the right outline, you know, like how we define our buckets or boxes or containers. You know, I had imagined it like if I'm coordinating a space, I'm thinking, what's my visual? What are my policies? What are my procedures? What's my training strategies? You know, what, but maybe there's a different way to, maybe we could organize it all differently. You know, it could be, we could think about it differently.
Yeah, I was wondering, have you, in developing any of your city web materials, ever done like a card sort with the user group?
You know, not personally, but the communications people,
Yeah.
that sounds familiar, but I wasn't personally a part of it.
Yeah, we do this all the time for our websites. And basically what you do is you take every topic that's in your guide and you stick it on an index card. And then you ask the people in the user group to take the index cards and group them together, how they think they should be grouped. And then you ask them how those groups should be labeled. And usually you get pretty, now we'll run like 5 or 6 of these card sorts, you know, and they can be very laborious, but you often get very consistent answers. Like often what we do is overkill, we find, because we get very consistent answers from the users about how they would put information together. And so I wonder if when we talked about shopping this with the different business owners, if even doing sort of a modified, low key, lower barrier card sort with those folks. There's some online tools now because we've had to learn how to do all this virtual. One of them is called Optimal Workshop, and I think that costs money, but there might be some free ones as well, but where you can actually have them do the card sort online.
Wow, thank you.
And they can do it as individuals, and that way you get even richer because you don't get as much group pressure, I guess, around how people organize stuff. But I don't know, we could look into something like that, because I think I hear what you're saying, Gretchen, which is that you don't know quite the best way to organize it, and you're organizing it from a program perspective, which is the right way to organize it for us, but the users may need it organized in a different way.
Yeah. I used to direct a nonprofit, and so I was thinking about from the standpoint of like, oh, if we would be in the program, you know, how would I, and so like you said, that program lens came into mind. What would I do to the built environment? What would I do to the artwork on the walls? What would I talk about to the staff that we would all want to be prepared for and know? How would I look at my policy and procedure notebook? Like I was thinking about, okay, if I want to be in safe space, what would be my steps? You know, is how I imagined it.
Well, it seems like those conversations that you suggested earlier with test driving it with businesses and the parks group are good ways to maybe have an informal card sort, or at least talk through the organization of the materials and find out what would make most sense to them.
Great. Well, I can enlist a colleague's help and see how far we can get with that.
Anything else we want to touch on in our sketch of the resource guide? This will evolve kind of iteratively. The way these things do.
Do we also want to take a moment to look over the Safe Space Program draft real quick?
Yes. Yeah, I think that's the next step. Let's go ahead.
Oh, okay, awesome. All right. Yeah, I'm jumping
Yeah. No, perfect timing. I really liked the additions that you made. Was that you, Gretchen, who made those? I really liked those additions.
You know, thank you. I don't know if it was completely me. I played with it a little bit, and I feel like I might have also gotten some input from some of the task force members. I did send, just this afternoon, I had the idea to send the document over to Debbie Aguilar. I'm looking for language around reporting. And I'm also wondering about your input. I think the document was initially a little directive around report hate and bias crime. And that may be exactly what we want to do. But I know there's situations where a person's experiencing an incident or a crime and is very adamant not to report. And what I'm thinking about is guidance around that situation. And I'm not meaning to direct one way or another, but rather to offer assistance. You know, if I'm a business owner and it's Saturday night and this is emerging in my papers, I'll say report, but the person to whom is experiencing it doesn't want to, I think I'd feel conflicted and I'd want some help. So I'm looking for a little bit to help build that part out.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Gretchen, because when we saw the example from Seattle, that is exactly what we did not like. We felt like that example was just, it was police or nothing, was sort of the direction on that. And we didn't think as a group that that was going to really be very positive for the community. Community members may not want to involve police, but they may want to have their voice heard, their story told. So yeah, good point, and good to talk about with Lieutenant Aguilar.
Great. Because we can receive reports that that don't follow to the police. I mean, we can take information and provide support and denounce the hate and problem solve safety planning and resources and not turn around and report that, you know, at the survivor or the victim's direction. You know, it just, that's an option.
I would like to also have additional conversation with Lieutenant Aguilar as we build out the program around how we can maybe socialize it with the officers. You know, I participated in an exercise with the department last week and was surprised at the number of officers still who I know have had a lot of training from Debbie, who still didn't, in this particular exercise, didn't think about Human Rights Commission and reporting bias incidents. They very much, when they're out on a call, tend to think about any laws that were broken. And if it's not illegal or if it's not a criminal matter, they tend to want to close it up. So this program might be another opportunity for Debbie to have like a touch point with the officers and remind them of the resources. I know she's hammered it home, but they get a lot of training, and I think that they sometimes don't remember everything.
Yeah, great.
Another thought that I had that could be related to this, but could also just be related to general conversation with Lieutenant Aguilar is maybe giving them some kind of like pocket card or business card for it would be useful, because they frequently give out their officer cards. And maybe if they had a little separate card for bias incidents, it might be another way to remind them. That was just something I thought about today, because during the exercise, one of them handed me their card, and I was thinking, you know, yeah, that if you've got a card that you're already handing somebody, maybe if you had a card that had other resources on it, you might hand that out too. So just another
great ideas. Yeah.
idea. So engaging Lieutenant Aguilar back in the conversation would be really great as we continue to develop, I think.
Great.
Kind of on that note, I wonder what I'm kind of thinking, like, again, moving forward. So once we have this kind of fleshed out, like, what does the continued support look like? Because to your point, Mike, even people with a lot of training don't always think of the tools that are available. So I know we had talked about doing like quarterly updates with our contacts, and maybe that could be something that we kind of tack on, like, hey, this quarter we're going to highlight like disability awareness, or this quarter we're going to highlight like gender violence. If we're real ambitious, I feel like each one of the months of the year has a theme that we could do. Like obviously Pride Month, we could talk about the queer community. Black History Month, we can talk about racism. Asian Pacific Islander Month, I believe, is March. I know that's a lot, so the quarterly might be realistic, but I think it would be another way to kind of, again, remind people of the resources and can kind of keep that relationship going with the businesses that are in this program of like, hey, we're here, like, what do you need help with? Hey, let's look at this thing, because this is a lot, and it's easy to kind of just like put it on a shelf and be like, okay, like we did the thing, rather than kind of stay on top of what's going on.
I agree with all of that. And I think sort of the biggest touch point will be that annual renewal. And so building out what that process entails, so hilarious, is I think going to be a big part of it, because yeah, I think those quarterly touch points are going to be really valuable, but you get a little bit longer touch point at that annual renewal.
I think it'd be good to start outlining like just what you're doing right now, what we think that would look like, and then we can try to figure out what resources we have and what resources we might need to add to it. You know, it's developing the content for a quarterly or more frequent education piece. You could imagine this task force could be a wonderful resource with, and I might be able to tap communications folks to help, and we could use our MailChimp, and we could also use our, the distribution of all the participants. I'm sure we'll create a mechanism for communicating with the participants, and that would be that. And then there would be ongoing response when we get calls or concerns or people are calling those things in. And I think that fits with our normal, provision of responding to complaints and concerns that we have. We'll have to watch the numbers and see if we continue to have capacity to keep up with getting responses back in a timely fashion and everything. It's hard to predict until we get into it, what we see. So, I mean, so far it's sounding pretty doable, I think, depending on the volume. If we suddenly have, 20 phone calls in a week, I think that'll quickly exceed probably all of our capacity, and we'll need to brainstorm how to augment it to keep up. But what a great problem to have. I mean, I think that would be amazing. Yeah. And probably setting some boundaries. I mean, this is a great resource, but it isn't a pathway into a lot of free consultation. And we don't want to usurp the opportunities for those paid consultants again. And maybe figuring out our boundary would be right at the beginning. Like, well, we can answer these questions, but offer this. But, can we do a free training? Probably not, but here's resources for those, so getting in place our boundaries would make sense too. I don't know if you have thoughts now, or if you think we should even write those out maybe into the body of the program.
I kind of envision it. I don't know if you've ever called the nurse hotline. So through my insurance, if you're not sure whether or not you need to go into the doctor, you call the nurse hotline, and then the nurse kind of helps you triage, like, okay, yeah, you really need to go see a doctor. I could see us doing that. Like, we can do an initial consultation where we're like, hey, let's help you identify what the problems are. Let's connect you to some resources, but like, you really need to go to a professional for this. And not that any of the people here aren't professionals, but we can direct them to that paid source. And not to say like, oh, you've called us like 3 times in 1 month, like no more, but just to give a realistic idea of like what our capacity is, because you're right, Gretchen, if we start getting, dozens of phone calls, like I don't have time to deal with that. And you already do so much. So yeah, that's what kind of popped in my head when you were talking about like, what would our support look like specifically?
Yeah. And that kind of is how it goes now, yeah. End up in conversations with folks, and it's triage and initial problem solving and pointing to resources. And sometimes those are online, and sometimes those are fact sheets the commission's already developed. And sometimes, like you said, it's, in this arena, I bet it would be training and consulting resources. Okay, good.
In terms of the communication, I think one way to build efficiency into it is to roll the planning in with awareness task force and just recognize that this is a separate audience that may be slightly different. So in my communication program at SAVE, our motto is create once, publish everywhere. And what that means is that we create kind of a core thing that we're going to talk about that month. So let's say it's Pride Month and we're going to talk about LGBTQIA+. Then we kind of figure out what the content pieces are that go with that month. What do we want to talk about? What's going on in Salem? What education needs to happen? Where are pain points? That kind of thing. And then you just build it out for the different audiences. So once you figured out what you're going to say, you write it a little bit different for each audience. So our general HRC audience, maybe that piece is a little bit more geared toward community issues and concerns. And then our audience of businesses that are participating in safe spaces, it's maybe a little bit more around reminding them of their opportunity with safe spaces and what we want them to do. So you kind of only build the communication one time, but you might tweak it for each audience.
Awesome, that makes sense. And so you're right, a partnership, the awareness task force could be a partner in the ongoing implementation.
Yeah, I know the people on that task force too, so it gives us a good opportunity.
Facts. You know, I'm starting to, and maybe we've already said this, but I'm also starting to think it looks like there's another document to create, maybe, which is the actual agreement.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that might be where we could embed concrete asks of the partner, you know, the business, the organization. And then maybe it's also where we do a little bit of an outline on, you know, what we can do and when we'll make referrals or something, just like really simple. I mean, I don't want to hem us in too much, but maybe that might be a really good idea. Just a simple like agreement, like, hey,
Yeah.
the city will provide, the Human Rights Commission will provide X and Y and Z. You know, we're asking of you X and Y and Z.
Yeah.
You know, then we sign.
And the summary already has, I think, what we're asking of them pretty spelled out, but I think it will read really different in an agreement document that is more really written for them.
Yeah. Unless anybody wants to, we can get to work on, like you're saying, morphing the, you know, hey, you wrote once, now we're going to tweak it. So now I'll tweak the one pager to be what an agreement might look like.
Yeah, and it will include what we will do in addition to what we're asking of them. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Any other thoughts that people had on the Safe Space Project draft document and the changes that were made and the current wording? Anything additional you think we need in this?
Well, this might be a topic for another meeting, but I would like us to internally like set aside some time to list, I guess, to like determine what terminology we want to use for in reference like to certain groups. I guess let me be a bit more specific, and that might help me like illustrate. Yeah. But you know, for example, in one of our outlines, we there's a note. For example, like when we refer to somebody who experiences bias, like do we refer to this individual as someone who is marginalized or someone who has experienced bias? And I think just like setting that in advance, that might be good for us to just set some time aside, like at our next meeting, to just sort of go.
I would love that. I find myself unclear on what we'd want to do on that, and would love the task force's direction on that kind of phrasing. Thank you, Byron.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and there's always evolving language on the different groups that we represent through Chapter 97. You know, not that it's a brand new phrase, but BIPOC is more preferred these days than some other language. And of course, we use LGBTQIA plus in our group. So even, you know, how we reference some of our communities is important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, good call out, Byron. And I think it is worth, is some of that done in Dr. Brown's glossary? Was it Dr. Brown who did the glossary?
I
that
think
saw?
so. Yeah, we could maybe start with that, but then I don't think that there's anything about what Byron specifically mentioned on bias versus marginalized. And I think that's really important because I've definitely seen a lot of discourse around that. So I appreciate bringing that to light.
Yeah.
Do you want to make that a whole conversation next time? Like, we can keep progressing the documents with the understanding that they'll adapt based on this
Yeah, I
discussion.
like that.
Could this be the agenda item next time? Okay. Tricarico, if you've seen a lot of discourse on that, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but would you be up for kind of bringing some of that in? And maybe Byron, all
Yeah.
of you, each of you may have some good thoughts to bring into that discussion. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me know if you need me to prepare anything on that. I think I'll so far rely on all of you to bring in your thoughts and experience and views on that.
We'll also go through an iteration, I'm sure, of all of this material with the broader HRC, who will bring a wider range of perspectives as well.
Yeah.
The last thing I'm wondering about, and I don't know if this is just like completely out of left field, but I also don't want to assume that none of our businesses we're engaging with don't have something to bring to the table as far as like their needs. So, you know, I don't know how to word this. I'm not even sure if I have it fully formed in a thought, but like, what are the barriers that they experience as business owners or as people interacting with the city, and how could we support them? You know, like, not just us saying, hey, like you need to be more inclusive. Like, what have they noticed? Because I know that was a big ask from the Parks Department of like, are people experiencing discrimination when they're trying to like preserve something with the parks, right? Like, or maybe there's an area that we are completely unaware of and we need to be educated in that and, you know, learn some more skills, because like I said, I don't want to make the assumption that we know all the answers, because I know I don't. So I don't know quite how to word that, but I'm open to hearing thoughts on that.
Makes me think about adapting the communications pieces to really ensure we're intending that two-way. Like, what else, and what are you needing and what are you experiencing, and are you as an entity experiencing discrimination, you know, and what resources do you want to share, you know, what lessons or lived experience do you want to bring into the table? I mean, kind of inviting a relationship.
Yeah, because it makes me think of when Rain brought to the table that a Black business owner had been mistreated, you know, or other business owners who experience marginalization specifically because of their identities, right? And or even a business that chooses to put like a BLM sticker in their window and like they get bad treatment for that, right?
Right. Right. And wouldn't that be something, I'm just thinking about, to discover the safe space project that addresses the customer in interaction, you know, there's these, I think this project is perhaps focused on what we can contribute, what the participants can contribute. There's not really a what we ask the public to contribute, but you start imagining another level to it that maybe just goes out to general public, like, hey, general public, this is what we're hoping you'll do to contribute to a safe Salem.
Yeah.
When you enter this space.
I think these business owners, they also want to keep their employees safe, right? Like that's a big part of it. And so a big reason for them to participate is that they can use these same resources if their employees are mistreated or if they themselves are mistreated. So I think building some of that language in to show the two-way process is going to be really valuable. I love that idea.
Yeah, and I think that also ties into your thought, Mike, about bringing it into the greater awareness task force, because a lot of this ties back to just letting people know that we're here. Because what happens when it's not in a business, like the incident we've been talking about with the parks, what happens when it's in a public space that isn't necessarily like staffed or manned? What are our expectations for Salem public to intervene and be there for each other? And like, I know that kind of expands it, but I feel like that's kind of in the spirit of what we're wanting. We want a safer community.
Yeah. I really like everything that we've built, and it just does seem like we have a bigger vision for it than what's been done in a lot of other spaces. And I find that I'm just really grateful for everybody's work on this, because I think it's going to be cool.
I'm thinking about some of the input we got in the student survey that the Human Rights recently sponsored with the students, and there was threads in the comments around, we don't want the community, we don't want people to come and behave in these ways and do these things and be so disruptive and be so hateful. I wonder if some of that sentiment can pour into what we're asking in these safe spaces of customers, of park patrons, of library patrons. There's an ask to the public, and if I'm a business, for example, and I'm going to be in the Safe Space project, maybe there's a part of what I'm asking of my customers that goes on my webpage or on a flyer or something.
Yeah.
It's almost a shared responsibility thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there's something in the signage too that is because the signage indicates this is a safe place, and we won't, and I don't know what the words on the sign will be, but we won't tolerate these kinds of behaviors, and so maybe that's another. Yeah, I really like that, bringing it back to the public. One of the things that I've kind of been obsessed with the last year because of my work is this idea of the public trust, and where do people have trust? And we're in a real crossroads in this country where people trust almost nothing. They don't trust the government. They struggle with trusting science, which is very distressing to me. They don't trust media. They don't trust social media. The one thing that people seem to consistently trust is not necessarily like businesses, but they trust their own employer. For whatever reason, people, when they choose an employer, they kind of view that as a relationship. And this isn't across the board that every single person trusts every single employer. But the research shows that my employer, among all those different things that I named off, is sort of the place where people place their most highest trust. And you think about it, it is where you get your paycheck every month, and it is where you have a social circle, and it is where you spend a lot of time. So it makes sense that people will report that in these surveys. Edelman is the research firm that does these surveys on the public trust. So anyway, the reason I'm saying that is that when we encourage businesses and employers in the city to sign on to something like this, we're actually reaching a much broader base of people, because people have significant amount of trust in their employer. And if their employer is saying, hey, this is a safe space, you need to treat people in a certain way in order to be employed here, it does make a difference, more so than maybe other avenues we might go for. So that's my little Edelman research rant. Sorry.
No, that's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Well, we're getting to the close of the hour. Have we kind of discussed all the things that are in our hearts and minds tonight, and regarding safe spaces? Do we have any member remarks and announcements? I have two. One is that Pride is happening in August. I think it's August 21st. Did I get that right? Let me check my calendar. And it's probably more of a question for the broader HRC, but it seems like we ought to table if it's truly an in-person event. And I don't know, have we tabled? Well, I don't think we've tabled anything for HRC because the stuff's at my house. So I'm pretty sure that hasn't happened. So is that something that we probably want to consider is tabling Pride, and we want to maybe bring that to the broader commission? I see thumbs. Okay, cool. The other remark that I wanted to make is just for informational. I'm now on the Chief of Police's Advisory Council. And I think I am, I don't ever want to assume, but I think I am probably the only LGBTQIA plus person, at least openly serving on that group. So please let me know if you know of any queer folks who are having experiences with the police. I would just be interested to be able to funnel that to that council, that kind of information. So just wanted to put that out there for the fellow members. Those were my only announcements and remarks. If we have no others, I think we can adjourn.